Good morning, everybody. Welcome to a new semester and a new season of the Lab 207 webcast. My name is Mr. Kite, and I'll be hanging out with you today. This new semester is going to be all about AP Environmental Science, so hopefully you'll find some of these videos beneficial. This first series is going to be about economics and sustainability. So today our focus is going to be on economics. Generally, I would have a set of objectives for you, but I didn't get those done today, so we're just going to go ahead and jump straight on in. For environmental science, we want to talk about economics because, like it or not, money makes the world go round. And as we go through our semester talking about the environment and things that humans do to the environment, a lot of it is going to relate to the idea of money and resources, etc. But before we start talking about that, we need to define the term sustainability. And throughout the year, we're going to talk about this idea of sustainability, which basically says that you are meeting the needs of today's population. So people living on Earth right now, they're getting their needs met, but you are not hurting future generations. So basically you are getting what you need today, but you're also leaving enough that tomorrow will be able to have what they need also. And that's the basic idea of sustainability that we're going to work on throughout the year. So if you were thinking about a logging operation, sustainable logging operations would say, all right, if you cut a tree down, plant a new tree, you've got the one you need for today, but you've also left one for tomorrow. And the other thing, and this is going to be the topic for a lot of stuff we talk about through these first couple of videos, is going to be economics. Economics drives a lot of what we do with the environment. So at its very basic level, economics is the study of the allocation of scarce resources. And by scarce, I don't mean like, I don't know, diamonds or Stradivarius violins or things that there's only a few of. All resources have some finite number of resources. I mean, there's only a few of them. So economics basically looks at how people divide up those resources and pass them from one person to the next. So within economics, there's a concept that you need to be aware of, and that is supply and demand. And you can see this graph here. Supply is the red line, demand is the blue line. It's an inverse relationship, and basically this talks about the way that people and markets behave when there are goods involved. So on the bottom, on the x-axis, you can see there's quantity, so that's how much of something there is, and then on the y-axis, there is price. Let's go with the red line first, supply. This is on the part of people making goods. As the price of a good goes up, they're going to want to make more of it, so you can see the upward trend of that line right there, and that makes sense. I mean, if you are manufacturing, let's say, t-shirts, if t-shirts are becoming more expensive, then you're going to want to make more t-shirts, so price goes up, quantity goes up. Now, on the other end of things, demand, that's the consumer, that's the blue line. And it's the opposite relationship. As the price of something goes up, demand for that thing goes down, which also makes sense to you. And we see this with gasoline all the time. As the price of gas goes up, demand for gas goes down. So the interesting thing is, how does a market ever land at having just enough of a resource at a price that people are willing to pay? And you can see kind of that middle point where the two lines cross over. That's known as economic equilibrium, and that is a place where the companies are making enough at a price that the people are willing to pay and everybody's happy. And when we talk about natural resources and using natural resources, we're going to talk about supply and demand a lot, because a lot of times in the natural world there is greater demand than there is supply, and that causes a lot of problems. You also need to be aware of the idea of externalities. And this is the idea that we don't necessarily bear the full burden of the things that we produce or purchase. So for example, right now I'm wearing a shirt. The shirt was probably produced in India. I paid, I don't know, 30, 40 bucks for the shirt, but I did not bear any of the consequences of the manufacturing of the shirt. So when the shirt was made, you know, there was probably pollution that was released into the air by the power plants that were used to power the factory. There may have been chemicals that were released into water supplies in the dyeing of the shirt or the processing of the cotton. There were fertilizers that were used in the growth of the cotton, but all of that happened somewhere else. I didn't do any of that stuff. So I paid for the shirt, I got the shirt, but I didn't have to bear the cost of the environmental or health consequences to those who were making the shirt. So those things that I don't have to deal with but still result from the shirt are known as externalities. And obviously, as you can tell, externalities is not a good thing at all. So there's two measures of how productive a country is, and in general, people say that as a country becomes more wealthy, the people in that country become healthier. Sometimes impact on the environment goes up, sometimes impact goes down, but in general, as the wealth of a country goes up, the health of the people and the well-being of the people in that country go up. So the traditional measure of the wealth of a country is the GDP, or the gross domestic product, and that is basically the cost of all things produced and sold by that country. So GDP is calculated based on four things: consumer spending, spending by investors, spending by governments, and whatever we export minus what we import. Now, GDP gets a bad rap sometimes because it doesn't include some things and it includes other things. So one example is it includes healthcare costs. If a country is unhealthy, like the people in that country are unhealthy, then healthcare costs are going to be higher, which is going to make GDP higher, which means people are going to look at that and say, oh, that country's got a really big GDP, the people must be happy, they must be healthy, but in reality, unhealthy people are pushing the GDP up. So a lot of people argue that GDP is not the best indicator of how healthy a country and the people of a country are. So a lot of people look at GPI, which is Genuine Progress Indicator. This includes tons of things. It includes economics, but it also includes income distribution. Are there big gaps between the wealthiest and the poorest people in the country? It includes the education of the public. It includes pollution. It includes the health of the people. It includes a lot of things that actually talk about the lives of the people. So an example of this kind of playing out is that in America for the last 100 years, GDP has gone up every single year. However, since the 1970s, GPI has been stagnant. So while the country might be getting richer, the people aren't getting any healthier. So just know GPI, that talks about the actual health and well-being of the people in a country. And it also includes the environment as well, where GDP does not. All right, two final slides for you to wrap up. In economics, and this is where economics and the environment start to come together, there's a model called the Kuznets Curve, and it basically talks about the impact of a country or an individual on the environment as the wealth of a country increases. And this curve right here is the Kuznets Curve. It basically says that as countries get wealthier, their impact on the environment goes up because they are producing more things, they are buying more things, and the producing and buying of things impacts the environment and natural resources. But at the peak of that curve right there, there is an equilibrium point or a tipping point where as a country gets more developed and becomes richer, their environmental impact can actually start to go down. And if you can think about this, it kind of makes sense where, you know, forever America worked off of coal-fired power, but we are now moving to a place where we might be starting to use wind and solar and things like that, so our environmental impact will go down. Or you can think about light bulbs. You know, you got a traditional incandescent light bulb that burns 65 watts of power. Over time, a country becomes more wealthy, and you can start to have those compact fluorescent bulbs, which only burn like 13 watts of power. So there is a point at which a country's environmental impact can start to go back down. And this can also happen by leapfrogging. Leapfrogging is basically the idea that as countries become more developed, they might skip over steps in technology. So if you think about it, America, we went like telegraph, and then we had like the little talk to the wall, hold the thing to your ear telephones, and then there were regular telephones, and then landlines, and then cell phones came along. A lot of developing countries, they will never have landlines. They just jumped straight to having cell phones. They leapfrogged over traditional like landline telephone systems straight to cell phones, which actually might be more sustainable than hanging, you know, the cable for telephones and digging up the ground and all that stuff. So that would be an example of leapfrogging. Here's our last topic for the day, and that's microlending. Microlending is basically the idea of giving small loans to people to help them to get businesses going which will sustain their lives. And as people have income that improves their lives, they tend to do less damage to the environment. So, for example, poor farmers might need money or need fuel for cooking. Sorry about that. So if you're a poor farmer, you need fuel for cooking. And so you may go out and cut down the forest if you don't have money. But if somebody is giving you a loan to increase the production of your farm, you're making more money, which means you can take that money and go buy wood rather than cutting down part of the forest to get what you need. Microloans are usually small loans that people are able to repay very quickly. They are not indebted to a bank, and they generally help people to get businesses going. They've been shown to be fairly successful. So this basically ties to the idea that as people become more developed economically, sometimes their impact on the environment goes down. And there's going to be lots more videos on this topic, but just kind of wanted to get you an intro to economics and sustainability and just some basic principles. Hope you'll join us for future videos. My name is Mr. Kite, and this has been the Lab 207 webcast. Thank you.